So, innovation and entrepreneurship, best practices for Kenya and Africa's digital transformation. We have a very able panel that will be discussing this. I want to invite Joel Karubiu, our country representative, export advisor at Estonia Business and Innovation Agency. Karibu sana. Let's welcome him with our clap. We have Njihia Mbugua. Karibu sir. The venture builder and solution architect. Welcome. We have Ken Njihia. Karibu on stage. Ken is a regional marketing and advertising expert. And then we're looking forward to having Angela Murigi from KCB. I don't know whether she's in the house yet. Okay, we'll proceed as is. So welcome, team. Your moderator is Moses Kemibaro. Karibu sana. Let's welcome them with a round of applause. Karibu.
Thank you so much. Is it morning or afternoon? Afternoon. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this interesting panel. So our topic is going to be focused on innovation and entrepreneurship, best practices for Kenya's and Africa's digital transformation. My name is Moses Kemibaro. I'm the founder and CEO of .Savvy, a digital marketing agency. I'm also a blogger, content creator, podcaster, technology analyst, and all of the above. So in this session, we're going to explore how innovation and entrepreneurship are driving digital transformation across various sectors in Kenya and Africa. We'll discuss how we can leverage these trends to bridge the digital divide and unlock new opportunities. And maybe as to get us started, I'll just have a seat now. We can maybe start off with you, Joel. If you can share with us some examples of successful government process automation initiatives in Kenya and the region that has significantly improved service delivery.
Okay, thank you very much, Moses. Maybe just for introduction purposes, for those of you, my name is Joel Karubiu. I work for the government of Estonia as their export advisor and their country representative. My comments today will be Estonian in nature, so please, if anyone asks me after this meeting why I said that I'm Estonian for this particular panel. So I will be giving case examples from Kenya and Estonia. So I think just to look at what government has done so far. One, we had in the morning about documentation at the cabinet. I think that for me is a great starting point in terms of where we are. From what our CS said around bulk documents and the rest, I was going to ask a question, but we were not given the opportunity. But what it means is there's more efficiency. And maybe what she didn't mention, because I know part of the process that went through, is actually how documents are moving within government today. It's no longer about, as she said, a driver taking a bulk document to whoever. It's about pinging the next person. And that has become something more efficient because if you all remember the way government works, is a letter is written, then on the side the CS writes delegated to Moses, Moses writes on the corner approved, sent to Mbugua, Joel. By the time that document comes back, the letter is defaced because of the number of comments that are on there. Now what government has done is comments are now uploaded on continuous thread. So that document is never touched. You give your comments, you sign it, you give your comments, you sign it. What has that done for government? They can actually track who's holding back a process, right? So if it's delegated to him and he's gone, he's left his jacket and gone to town, after 2 days you're asked, why didn't you sign this document? So that for me is already a process that we are seeing happening. It might not be visible, and I'll comment later as to some aspects around how government communicates some things. It may not be visible to us, the citizens, but for those of us who deal with government, we're actually seeing some efficiencies in that aspect. When we look at eCitizen to a certain extent. We fight around eCitizen and saying it may not be effective. Some of us call it a marketplace. Some of us are saying maybe is it efficient or not. Today, I may not really need to go to a government office for some services. Unfortunately, the final step, which is the last mile in terms of government services, we still need to go to an office. And why are we going to that office? Either to sign a document or to collect the document. Now, those are efficiencies that we already have. We are moving forward. We just need to get that last mile done. And that last mile is looking at what more can be done, because one of the things that our government has been talking about for a while, which will be controversial in this conversation, in this panel, is how they identify you, which is your digital ID. In Estonia, the backbone of the country is a digital ID. Everything is anchored on one digital ID. And I know some people in this room are saying, my citizenship is going to expire in 10 years. What I find the government struggling with is communication. It's not about an ID expiring. It's about upgrading a technology. If I'm given an ID in Estonia, 10 years later, I have to go and give a new photo. Because when I gave that ID, I didn't have a beard. Now I have a beard. Maybe I did something and my fingerprint was messed. I need to go and give. That's what I think the government is not talking about. It's not about you as a citizen expiring. It's technology that needs to be upgraded. We all have bank cards. We all pick them. After 3-4 years, we go and renew our bank card. So what is this fight about a digital ID? And maybe this room can tell us why they are so anti this digital ID. But I know the answer, and the answer I'll tell you later. So I'll start with those two for now.
Well, thank you so much. And I think it's very interesting, Joe, what you said, because I see this so often, even in the work where I've been, working with people in government and talking about digital transformation. And it's quite interesting that a lot of the stories and, things that they've accomplished are not in the public domain for whatever reason. But more importantly, it's more advanced than we imagine and more useful or important than we could possibly appreciate. Coming back to you, Njihia, but when I saw that we had both two Njihias on my panel, the next question that came to my mind is, are you guys relas?
We should explore that. Hello. Let me tell you a very interesting story. And it goes back to everyone, or the previous panel mentioning that people should get their own websites. My full names are Kenneth Mbugua Njihia.
No way.
Yeah. The .com belongs to me, MbuguaNjihia.com. So this guy who I've known for, let's call it 12 years on Twitter, always pops up as Mbugua Njihia. And we've met unofficially maybe 10 years ago. And then I had an event on Saturday and somebody asked me, who hadn't seen me for over 10 years, they were like, are you Mbugua Njihia, the techie? And I was like, no, but this guy just always pops up in my world. So then I saw the same panelist list that you saw. So I don't know whether we're from the same village, but
we'll explore that.
You have my website, which I need to steal from you.
So we need to lock it.
Just tell guys you're trying to scam and be me.
In fact, it actually begs the question, then the digital identities are so important in the signatures, because as you can see, we have people identical names on this panel, and it's a very risk, especially this personal identifiable information where somebody could impersonate the other, potentially.
Just check on Google. Maybe it's your wife they were looking for. They say Mbugua Njihia wife. So maybe that's your call now.
So, Mbugua, coming back to the Mbugua Njihia, this one here. Yeah. The brand, The brand. Can you tell us what solution architects are doing in this space? I mean, you're somebody who's doing a lot of cutting edge stuff. You've seen things go ground as they are. What are you seeing and what are you doing around, digital transformation in this context as an entrepreneur and a solution architect?
Great. I think a good starting point would be to understand that term, solution architect, has actually evolved and is more cross-functional. So you touch on both the technical and the business elements. So on the technical side, especially looking at enterprise, because you're also talking about lots of digital transformation, the role of a solution architect is to make sure that the
interests of the business actually align to some of the technology choices and decisions that are being made, right? And whether those are short-term, middle-term, long-term. Then on the business side is to actually then focus and say, can you also wear the hat of the consumer, of the person who's going to be interacting with that solution, and say, I'm gonna look at whatever we're trying to do internally from that lens and make it make sense. You're struggling.
Like the design thinking, really.
The design thinking. So I call it marrying technology to the marketplace. So that's what we kind of like end up doing. And what I've also seen in terms of some of the more interesting sort of applications, that's not applications, more of the risks in terms of enterprise, is that role had been on the back burner for a long time, until when now people start saying, we need to drive digital transformation. I was wishing Angela was on the panel here. She could share some insights about how they've seen it happen in banking and some of the ways, whether it's the CTO, because remember, I've talked about it as a role, whether it now sits with the CTO, whether it sits with the CIO, whether it's a newly created space with these different organizations. It's becoming a really important one to just help organizations figure their way out. Because one, every day there's new technology. There's the nice, bright and shiny, and you're also dealing with enterprise legacy systems. Hence my reference to Angela and the banking sector. In the banking sector, legacy systems, you're told you still run on stuff that even like COBOL. How does that interface with all this new stuff when you're talking about M this, M that, AI this, AI that? Solution architecture is literally that. Looking at the opportunity, the problem, and also the market in one glance, and figuring out how that all comes together.
You remind me of this phrase that we used to use a lot when I was, I think, running the pivot competition about a decade ago. And he said, don't create a solution looking for a problem. Always have a problem and then create a solution around it. And that is so fundamentally important to what you're saying with the approach that you use when you work with the market and you're building for them. I'd like to come back to you, Kenneth Njihia. I am very, very obsessed with all things AI. And more importantly, I think even last night we saw Made by Google, the event where they showed their new phones. But more importantly, I don't know if anyone realized this, but they were talking about Gemini essentially being on every Android device. For me, that was profound because it told me that potentially Google could become the number one generative AI company by virtue of the fact every Android phone will have their AI available to them. But more importantly, let's look at a local story. It's a lot of hype, a lot of conversations. And I think when I talk to my own clients and people in this space, they're always asking me, Moses, how do I use this? How do I move forward? How do we add value to our business processes? How do we incorporate it in marketing or supply chain? And maybe you can give us your perspective around how you see businesses in Kenya and the rest of Africa adopting and utilizing technology like generative AI to really make them more competitive, more productive, and so forth.
So my background is in advertising agency, running an agency. I worked for Dentsu for many years. And this is really a question that we asked ourselves internally to be able to better deliver for our clients. The pressure is always increasing for greater ideas, greater concepts, quicker turnaround times. And I'll give you an example from the advertising at a large scale and then from a personal level. But if you take early in the year, you started seeing billboards with essentially AI-generated images, right? Where a client is saying, why would I want to spend 1 million shillings on a photo shoot for 3 people? Can we generate this to where it looks semi-realistic? And then, all of a sudden there are people who are very keen eye in the advertising space where you see 6 fingers. But a lot of people don't really recognize that. But from an agency standpoint, I don't know how many of you know what Shutterstock is, but it's essentially an image bank for visuals. And you'll find that it's Labor Day. 3 banks have used the same image because it's the only one with an illustration of a Kenyan on a mountain with a Kenyan flag, and they end up in print, right? So you get a call and you say, did you guys copy this idea from this other person, right? And no, you say, sorry, client, you didn't want to do a photo shoot. That's too expensive for you. So we all downloaded the same image. So the current space where AI is from a visual perspective, which is very beneficial to agencies and clients, is you're able to generate unique things. However, they're not, from version 1 to version 5, the improvement is radical. You can almost not identify an AI-generated image right now, and it's much cheaper. So from our standpoint, where we were sitting, waiting to get rejected for a photo shoot that needs, let's call it 3 days planning, a PO to come out, then you pre-production, production, we can now pretty much turn it around quite quickly. And that's beneficial to everyone, especially when you're not doing major things like a TV commercial or something of that sort. So AI is going to continue to improve on that front, where it's providing solutions for not just corporates, but individuals to be able to create content quickly, and it's the quality is quite high. From a personal perspective, I did a small project in Watamu. I didn't really know much about the audience. Putting content into a website, I heard somebody talking about 1,200 websites. I was like, my goodness, that would drive me up the wall. But for my own personal website, I went and I said, please give me a write-up on some villas in Watamu that would be attractive to Europeans. 10 seconds later, I had a full write-up. Then I typed in 10 things to do, top things to do in Watamu. 10 seconds later, I had a full write-up on that. Give me my first blog post on the wildlife and things to do in Watamu. I can pretty much do a blog every week. That is almost 100% factual. You have to do some fact-checking, but it's for the normal person, you can get away with it. And so I can quickly understand how to churn out a lot of content for a lot of websites. So for people that are small business, even big business, AI is really just phenomenal right now. The innovations are getting better. The competition is heating up, so the solutions have to be more factual. Even if you talk about Twitter right now, it actually fact checks the data that you put out. It's no longer just fake news that flies without community notes. So there's multiple levels of where AI is very beneficial, from a large scale to a small scale. Customer service solutions where somebody asks a question on WhatsApp and an AI bot is in the background giving the answer. Takes away resources. A lot of people, when this AI rush came in, were like, advertising agencies are finished, but there's still very unique and local insights that need to be produced to produce the work that actually catches the eye of Kenyans. So advertising agencies, I believe, still has some time, but the solutions that are coming out are really helpful on many levels. So I think that would be my take.
Great, thanks for sharing that. And maybe just to add, I think, because like yourself, I'm a practitioner in digital marketing, I think one of probably the most underappreciated aspects, of course, of digital marketing is how much data and insight you get out of it. And just for the room, I think, again, looking at small businesses and people who could never afford a business analyst. The other day, I took a report generated, I think, out of Google Analytics for a whole year, put it into ChatGPT, told it, tell me what's going on with this data. The insights it was able to explain in a language that is for an executive summary, for a C-level executive to make a business decision, was absolutely outstanding. Meaning that, as somebody was saying when I was doing that session, does that mean business analyst jobs are gone? And I said, no. What's going to happen is the business analyst who's using AI is the one who's going to take your job. Yeah, so they say that the AI isn't going to take your job. The person using it is the one who's going to take your job, because they're able to amplify the inherent skill sets and capabilities in a way that they could not before. So a person who's maybe a B-level performer becomes an A+ performer because of AI, So that's the kind of opportunities that exist. I want to come back to you, Joel, and let's talk about cybersecurity. All right, that's a huge topic today. I think everyone in the world today is very well aware of the issues of cybersecurity. I think including Donald Trump and Elon Musk, was it last night or the day before, where apparently their conversation was hacked for 45 minutes. But what are we saying? Cybersecurity is very much with us at an individual level. Cyber threats are increasing all over the world. In fact, the big issue is that AI is enabling essentially cybersecurity experts as well as those who are bad actors competing and fighting each other using AIs. But Joel, what can you tell us about the cybersecurity situation and what it means within the Kenyan and African context?
Thank you, Moses. I'll give reference to where cybersecurity has come from an Estonian perspective, and bring it to Kenya. Estonia was the first country that was hacked as a country in 2007 by our neighbors. So for those of you who know where Estonia is, we have a very lovely neighbor. He's currently invading another country as we speak. So we don't speak loudly about what he's doing. But Russia hacked Estonia in 2007. The government services all went down for maximum 10 seconds because Estonia had built resiliences knowing who their neighbor was. Now, what does that mean for cybersecurity? It means first you have to understand the evolving threat landscape that you're always dealing with. As you mentioned, AI also brings new stuff. But what we are saying from a cybersecurity perspective is, do you understand your business enough to know where people would be looking for you? Or do you just go and always just check, okay, there was a cybersecurity threat that happened here or there? Are you bringing it home into your own, even household? Now, a Estonian example of why cybersecurity cyber attacks has not been as significant, or there are attacks all the time, we don't refuse, but why they've not had a successful threat into Estonia is because of one thing. We have what we call a one only principle. That one ID is everything. And the country protects that ID. You cannot get anywhere into Estonia unless you get through that ID.
So the ID is a single source of truth.
That is a single source of truth. And I know we have issues around collection of data. And in countries like Estonia, yes, we also collect data from different signature points. So I can collect your data from the hospital. I can collect your data when you're doing your driving license. But after that data is collected once in that platform, you should never give it out again. Because Estonia now has then put a distributed ledger that if it was collected when you are getting your health, when you are doing your NTSA, whatever it is, if someone else wants your information, they can call from the NTSA database, right? When they call from the NTSA database and saying, okay, let's, for example, I've gone to Aga Khan and I've asked for Joel's data because we are all interlinked by that one ID. If it calls the NTSA database asking for give us Joel's ID and his photo, I will get a message for me to accept for that information to be shared. Okay, so the thing that is critical in terms of data, and that's why cybersecurity is key for us, is because the owner of the data is who? The individual, not the government. And this is something we sort of struggle here. We think the government owns our data, and they've told us they own our data. Yes, they continuously hammer it to us. In Estonia, the data subject is the owner. I can refuse for the police to access my data. Because in the system, I will ask, why is the police asking for my data? And the police have to give a reason as to why they need your photo or your health record or whatever it is. So when you look at cybersecurity from that aspect, because for us in Kenya and Africa, the problem is we have so many entry points to finding me, including me coming to this hotel today. Luckily, I was not asked to sign any book.
What happens to those books, those dirty books that they make you sign in all the time?
Wait for 2027. You'll have your answer.
You'll have your answer soon. But the thing is, we have so many collection data points in Kenya, and that is a challenge. That's the entry point. Because if I went and got that book that you're talking about, I have 300 numbers. If I want to hack all of you today, I will do it. Right? How many of you signed into Hyatt Wi-Fi?
Are you sure it's the one?
This table is very quiet.
You don't do
Exactly. Did you ask a question? And I'm not saying Hyatt Wi-Fi has any problem, but that's another entry point. Right? So when we're looking at these things, it's about asking that question. And that's where the cyber threats come from. because we're very, let me use the word loose to give our data, right? Especially when it's free. When there's something free, right?
The product is free for sure. Register and you win.
Fast, and we are the quickest to do it. So for me, the way I look at the Kenyan landscape in terms of cyber is we are giving our data too loosely. And that is the problem we are facing. And if we can just query more, just ask harder questions. Why are you taking my data? Where are you taking my data? I was very happy today, and I don't know where Hilda is, when she told me I have to put this yellow mark on you for you to consent for pictures to be taken. That is a step in the right direction, right? Because now I had to consent to that conversation. I had to consent that my picture will be taken. My photos are very expensive, by the way, but I had to consent for this to be done. So I think from a cybersecurity, it is at a personal level that we now need to start taking charge. That would be my comment on cyber.
So it almost feels to me that one of the caveats is just basic digital literacy. People knowing, or rather not knowing what they should know. And as a result of that, they're vulnerable. And that basically is creating the biggest problems. Great. Njihia, I'd like to come back to you. And I think I'd like to understand from your perspective, digital transformation trends going forward. What are you seeing? What are the possibilities? What are the opportunities? I know I initially asked the question around health, but are there any specific trends that you're seeing going forward that are relevant for our audience here in Kenya and the African region?
Great question. I think he's touched on some of them, especially in the health sector. And looking at digital, at ledgers, using the blockchain for health information. How many of you remember exactly what the doctor said to you the last time you're in hospital? Probably not. You're feeling bad. They've given you a receipt. You go put it somewhere at home. And if you even look at that receipt, you can't really tell what it was for. Like, that history is kind of like lost on a lot of us. So I think healthcare is one of those places where I'm seeing a lot of these technologies getting manifest in a way that you can appreciate. I know it's great to generate. He says his photos are very expensive, but we could clone him and generate maybe a better looking version of him. We've got a good friend of ours who's done that on LinkedIn, and he's got his digital clone talking to us now. That's nice, right? It's nice. But what's better is that if we could actually then bring these technologies home and say, could I have access to my medical data portable? I talked about going to Aga Khan, I've gone to MP Sharp, gone to this other place, and have all that in one place. And then you come in and infuse AI in a way that is analyzing that information and says, okay, I decide let's sync our data. And because we come from the same region, maybe it's Moranga, maybe it's Molo, we're predisposed to certain things, but I would not know that. But because we have now this AI in the back, constantly looking at this data and says, okay, this guy went for a prostate exam, these were the findings. Connect the dots and really surface that information that if in the next 5 years I was prone to getting something that would be debilitating, I catch it early and I can start that intervention much earlier on. That's talking about blockchain technologies in a way that's relatable. Now, going to AI, again, still very much a buzzword, but one of the things I'm very excited about, and I know some of the universities are doing this quite heavily, is how do we fast track our own research initiatives to develop our own, like medicines that work for us. We're getting to the era of personalized medicine. If I say finish this for me, 4, 2, 2. Are we all Gen Zs in the room? Malaria. What was the formula for malaria medicine? 4, 2, 2, 2. Like, it's a constant. If you're Lewella, if you're Moses, it is 4, 2, 2, 2. But where we are going, it is based on your maybe BMI, based on your diet, based on this, based on that, based on your health, how healthy you are, how active you are, maybe to deal with a certain predicament for you. Your personalized regimen should be X. So we're moving to the era of personalized medicine, which is very exciting, because then we say, how can we then make sure that we're not, that if you're at risk of something like cancer that is very broad and general, how do you drive an intervention that works for you? And to top that off is in agriculture. because I also believe food is medicine. And food being medicine, I think, who knows of a local strain of food, a seed, someone throw a name, local food strain that you could relate to. I'll give you one, maize. We've got katumani. Katumani engineered to grow well in arid areas of former eastern Kenya, right? Now with AI, you can actually fast track that across a lot more food categories to ensure that we can actually have proper nutrition. So health as a direct function of nutrition is one of the areas I'm also pretty excited about and seeing action towards, but very critically to also avoid us falling into what I call food colonization. Because if you know that the conversation around food security and the reason why we need to continue to using these technologies to actually unearth stuff that will protect us, more longer term. So those are the ones that are pretty exciting and a bit more cutting edge apart from generating Christmas cards via AI.
Yeah, great. Kenneth, coming back to you. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something because, as Njihia said, you have to learn also from where our global leaders as well in some of these things. Estonia AI policy was done in 2000. That's when they started talking about AI. And now it's a hot potato for us here. I'll give 2 examples of AI and how it has changed. One is in health. Today, in Estonia, globally, you can detect cancer to about 96.4%. AI has moved it to 99.2%. So, as you're saying, predictive, knowing what's happening, AI is giving you that. Education sector. In AI, Davis talked about, I think someone had picked the aspect of homework. In Estonia, AI is used in the homework field. So the child's homework is determined by how you did in class during the day. So not everyone is told, go and do 4+4. There are some who do 4+5 because they moved from 4+4. So because everything is digital, by the time you get home, what is deployed to you is based on your skill of that time. So you're not dealing with everyone being given the same thing at the same time. And I'll give an example. For those of you who are parents who are dealing with CBC, I know there are some in this room. One of the subjects in CBC is swimming. Do you know that? How many of you? Don't linger me at this point. One of the subjects is swimming. And this is not an AI example. This is a generalistic example. CBC, swimming. At the end of every term, there is an exam on swimming. Mairela, there in Kirinyaga, the only thing they have is a river. My child in Nairobi goes for swimming classes. How are we going to judge the two? But we're deploying a curriculum. Is this curriculum actually speaking to all of us? And that's where the digital divide is coming in. We're talking about digital literacy. We have laptops, we have iPads in Nairobi, but that child that side is not even enabled with electricity. Are we talking the same language? So I think those are some of the conversations I just wanted to bring because really, that's what partnerships should be talking about, just to add.
Wow. Thanks for that insight. That was amazing. In fact, talking about the cancer detection, I think there's actually here in Nairobi, they're already using AI-enabled medical imaging. And I remember talking to an IT manager at one of these hospitals, and you're telling me there's so many instances where guys are going in with a broken leg, guys are going in with something entirely different. And during their diagnosis or looking at the image, the software is picking up and saying, okay, we can see the break is of this type, blah, blah, blah. But we're seeing some abnormal cells here. And it looks like this person has an early instance or precursors of a cancer here in Nairobi. So this stuff is real. It's actually happening even right here in Nairobi. Coming back to you, Kenneth, I'd like to understand from your point of view, the technology industry in Kenya, in Africa. We see a lot of negative behavior, things like gambling and so forth, which of course are affecting the youth. But we also see a lot of opportunities around areas like financial inclusion and empowerment through even the ability for freelancers to work online. What are some of the opportunities that you see where the technology industry can make a positive impact around how technology and platforms are used to empower our people?
So I think I'll give 2 examples, and I'll start with a project that I was exposed to about 2 years ago, where M-Pesa is such a big part of our lives. And what ended up happening is parents would send their kids to school. The kids want some money to buy snacks or whatever it might be. And Safaricom ended up with this really big problem where the mother would register 2 SIM cards, right? And the kids would be in school. The mother would essentially be sending money to herself, right? Because she's registered on that SIM card. And then the child would be able to access the money. But what they realized is these kids need data. They need airtime. They really actually need an identity, right? And when I say kids, let's even give them a bit more maturity and call them a 15-year-old. So what they realized over the many years of existence of M-Pesa is that they need a solution to be able to give these kids an identity. And now it currently sits, I don't know if it was launched, I think it was, but the identity now sits under a primary account holder who is the mother. My daughter is called Wangoi, so Ken is the dad. He registers Wangoi under his account. Wangoi has a phone. He's able to give her petty cash, and she's able to pretty much function as herself, but without the risk of my identity being cloned. Yes, it was by me, but the user is somewhere else in another town doing some other activities. And if that phone gets lost or something happens, it's very hard to hold the child liable for such something malicious that might happen. So these kind of innovations that are sometimes brought in from ourselves locally and or borrowed from other countries, I think that's the way to go, where we're just open with understanding the nuances in our market. M-Pesa is everywhere. And we need to be able to innovate to live on that ecosystem. Luckily, I've had a lot of exposure to Scandinavia. And one of the things that they have in relation to gambling, which I think Kenya has to really speed up its security, is one, the unhealthy habits of gambling, where the youth, people with no hope, are really turning to this to make it rich. It's being advertised to them massively. The biggest taxpayers obviously are beneficial to the government. But in relation to the Estonian model, where their one ID is everything, in for example, Sweden, your ID is linked to your gambling patterns, and they can see your salary, so they can actually cap in the system how much you are allowed to gamble per month, right? So it's not salary has entered, yote imeenda, right? And the school fees is not paid. But in Sweden, the system actually says for all the machines, casinos, the mobile gaming, everything is linked to your ID, linked to your bank account, linked to your credit. So you're allowed to gamble, no one is stopping you, but the government is actually able to implement a system where they say you have a cutoff, right? So I think we are behind, but we need to catch up, especially in that sector. I hope somebody somewhere in a company is trying to solve for this, because I don't believe that the gambling companies that are benefiting will be able to be the ones also selling these solutions into the market, into the people. But that's definitely an area of one opportunity and concern that needs to be tackled.
Oh, that's amazing. I think the Swedish and I think people from the Scandinavian region are very socialist in how they look at things. They look at the well-being of the person. I think that the happiest people is it Denmark in the world. Every year they're voted as the happiest people, and the state takes good care of them. So at this point in time, I know we have very few minutes left, but I think if we can take 1 or 2 questions from the audience, we'll be more than happy to entertain our panelists with any questions you might have. Is there anybody who would like to ask this panel any questions? I love the way Joel, for instance, is talking as if he's Estonian, but it's wonderful. You are Estonian. You have a villa there somewhere.
I have an ID.
Okay, so sorry? Oh, there is a question.
So this question goes out to our resident Estonian. How do you think GOK needs to do, or what do you think they need to do in order to gain the confidence of Kenyans? Whilst eCitizen has eased a lot of moving around, the costings plus opacity, revolving around the system, creates a clouded feel. So it's a question without a question mark, more of a comment, but maybe just tell us about what do you think the government needs to do to build the confidence of Kenyans?
There are two things that if I was sitting on the house on the hill, I would do. One is create trust. We do not trust our government. Unfortunately, that's where we are today. We don't trust what they're doing. They're doing good things, but we don't trust them. And the reason why we don't trust them is my second point. The government is more concerned about talking about features than talking about benefits. I'll give an example of the digital Maisha card. We've all been told about a chip. It's a chip. What are the benefits of having this card? Let us unpack those benefits. Then maybe we'll be willing to adopt. But it's all about, this thing, it has a chip, it's international standard, and I hope the recording will be stopped at this time. It's international standard, and I don't know but what are the benefits of having this card? And there are very many benefits of having that card. And I'm not by any chance promoting our government, but there are benefits to it. We've talked about cybersecurity. We've talked about portability of information, as Njihia said here, right? So, but we're not giving those pointers out. We are saying, take this card or perish. I think that's the issue. But coming back to the aspect of trust is built over time. And immediately you break trust, whether it's a relationship, whether it's a friendship, building that trust is the biggest thing that we're facing as a country. I don't trust that my money is being used well. I don't trust that my taxes are being used well. I don't trust that the loans we are getting are being used well. If those things actually started happening and we could see them, then we are willing to adopt all these things that they're asking from us. So I think those would be my initial answers to that.
Thank you very much, Joel. Do we have another question? There's two questions.
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the insights. My question is towards zero trust and zero knowledge. Means you don't have to expose your information. You can just probably give a card with no information there, scans it, and then you are admitted into let's say this forum without actually giving your information out. You have registered on only one place, right? That's probably the central place where you have your personal information and you don't have to expose it anywhere else, right? Are we going towards that?
Okay, so we'll take the second question and then they can answer both.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for the insights. On the topic of entrepreneurship innovation, a big element of that has been in hubs, where you see a lot of young people being housed in an incubator or one thing or the other. The challenge, we have a lot of activity that's followed by a lot of money, but we have very little in terms of M-Pesa. We have very little in terms of actual solutions to market problems. How would you speak into that space to help us? Because one of the challenges is increasingly now investors are very cautious about all these valuations. And it seems like there was something I was reading not too long ago. For every failed enterprise, those founders have started another 3, 4, and it seems it's a loop. So for them, it almost looks like they're doing funding rounds to make money, not necessarily to offer solutions. And then that completely kills the innovation and the entrepreneurship because you need the balance between the two. How would you speak based on your experiences into that space? Moses, maybe I could start with the last question. We often deal with multiple issues So the first one is one of culture. One in Africa, or at least in this part of the world, in Nigeria it's different. In Kenya, we don't celebrate failures. Because you came and started something and you failed, you're a failure, I told you so, right? So we don't have that culture. But out there in Silicon Valley and in Europe, you having tried something and you've grown it to a specific point shows that you've got pedigree. I know you failed on that one. It may be a function of market dynamics. Market was not ready. COVID happened, etc. But I've seen that you've got the chops to be able to run a business. I'm willing to bet on the jockey and put him on a different horse. Then, of course, there's the storytelling that we have. One is that I'll assume ulikula pesa. I have no idea about the dynamics you're dealing with, about your team dynamics, about how much technology costs to run certain things. So there's that gap that needs to be covered. Now to the solutions is speaking. You mentioned M-Pesa. M-Pesa, we all know it got a through pass. We need more through passes, right? Where you're talking about, and here's what I'm passionate about, there being citizen organizations that build out local solutions that work and probably need a partnership with someone in enterprise. You've got someone in the banking sector who can't move as fast, but you've got a fintech that wants to innovate. Can they be under a corporate incubator that has got the governance structure, that has got all the stuff around legal, that has the capital to probably go to the market and say, we're actually funding this from profit. We're not using customer funds. We're not using investor funds that are looking for a 10x return. Instead of investing in CSR, how about you invest in something that has got the possibility of growing into the next big thing and offering employment and probably being exported? The gentleman earlier had also talked about zero trust, and we've had the PKI conversation for many years. And I remember when ICTA was running with the PKI conversation, we were looking at adopting a solution from, I think it was from Korea. I think Samsung was going to run with it. And asked myself the question, are we not able to do something that is tempered for us? This digital ID. Ni nini nimetushinda? That we have to go and get something international grade, as opposed to bring all the brilliant minds that can sit under any one organization, whether it's ICTA, etc., build out a local solution that we know is addressing a local problem, so that once we scratch our own itch, can we then go to Uganda and say, knock, knock? Because if you go to Uganda straight, they'll ask you, where has this been done before? Bringing that pedigree. So the area of enterprise coming in, and for us to see, my bet is on more corporate accelerators and incubators that allow us to plug into, to essentially cover the gaps that we've seen traditionally, whether factual or by assumption, that have plagued the traditional way of us doing startups, raising funds, and then probably failing to scale those out in one way or another.
I know there's an earlier question. Do you want to take that?
No, I'll add on to his question and then also his. In Estonia, startup is a startup for 10 years. Not our 3-year, 2-year turnaround, 10x conversation. Secondly, supported by the government. So the incubators are supported for the long term. Estonia is a startup country. They always call themselves a startup country. And they've embraced a culture of experimenting. So a lot of guys have failed, a lot. But the few that have come out, you have the 10, 11 unicorns, the Bolts of this world. You all know that Bolt is Estonian, despite its other issues. Drivers are now refusing. That is not our issue. As we give the platform, please, musinisalimie baadaye. Platform is Estonian built. Drivers are Kenyan. Now, so when you look at that, incubation is a long-term game. And I'll explain why Estonia has been successful. Because the government refused to be the provider of solutions. Private sector provides the solutions. Government provides the problem. People are struggling to move from Mudidi Road to town. Tell us how they'll get to town. If you give us a solution, we shall buy. So government buys solutions from private sector. Government doesn't build, as opposed to our side this way, right? So creating that enabling environment, private-public partnership is what has driven Estonia for the longest time. Government says we don't have money, but if you have a solution that can serve the citizen, because the citizen is one complaining, we shall be able to buy. So I'd want to add to that if we could do more of that and create those more enabling environments, then I think we would be in the right place. When it comes to zero knowledge, which is, if I understand what you're saying, it's just a card that is there with a number, then we have that already. That's our current ID. And it's only used to identify us when we walk into somewhere. If I know all of us in this room have given a wrong number of their ID. True or not true? You either change the first number or the last number, isn't it? Especially when you're told, can you sign in somewhere? If you want us to continue that way, then it's fine. But if we're going to move to what we are saying, which is a digital economy, then we must also advance in terms of the kind of equipment we have, which is a chip-based card. In Estonia and what you have said about Sweden, we just did not reach the point of gambling. But in Estonia, everything of yours on that one ID, including how you register from school. So you're given that ID on the day of your birth. The number is issued on that day. You know that registration birth certificate, that's the same number. It is used in terms of registering your bank account. It is used in terms of registering your passport. Everything is linked to that one thing. Why is it a benefit? And I talked about features versus benefits. Benefit, if today you lose your job in Estonia, the government knows. Immediately at that end of the month, you're moved into the unemployment fund. And you start getting a stipend until you get another job. Today, if I lost my job, who would know? Except though I have Condad. So how do I even go and register that I'm looking for a job? Right? So I think for me that ID, we need to have a deeper conversation about what that ID can do. AI, when the ID is linked to your bank account, as you've said in Sweden, at the end of, like for example, if I bought tires today, I want to replace those tires in 3 years. On my third year, I'll start seeing promotional conversations from my bank. We know you're about to buy new tires. Kingsway have an offer. X has an offer. What do we do with our banks today? I wish Angela was here, should have told us, right? Me, I get a text from QuickMart every Friday at, I think, midday. And the first thing is tell me, Unga has gone down by 2 bob. There's an offer. What more can we do? AI now helps us do some of those things. So I think for us, when I talk about knowledge, it's all about the data and the data you're giving. But then, as we say, we must trust where the data is first. And then we can use it for whatever else we want to use it for.
Maybe a quick one on the trust issue. We're still dealing with a lot of silos. Insurance guys want to keep their own database. The bankers are doing the same. The supermarkets are doing the same. It's because we don't feel, and we've experienced this, and I've raised it even with the CEO here on various occasions, where you use something that should be considered a national identifier, but then you end up getting mired in a legal issue because that very identifier cannot be trusted. Like, hey, this guy signed on to this service with his national ID. I pinged, say, the National Registry to confirm are these details correct. He comes and does something nefarious on this side, and when I say it is him, and it was data that I received from this channel, as a service provider, you're still crucified. It will mean that I'll then go at extra cost to make sure that I have Moses in front of me, I take a photo of him, and when I scan whatever I'm scanning from him, I want to guard that with my life and say, this is my data. Because I collected it, person present, and therefore I guard it with that's business intelligence for me. So until we get to the point that we can go back to that trust conversation, that, hey, is this guy or is this lady who they say they are? I mean, whether it's blockchain, whether it's whatnot, we still have all our data in silos. And most of us, if you're married, there's probably a database you own somewhere that still says you're single with no children. It's crazy.
In fact, your surname is unchanged.
Yeah, so I mean, it's unchanged, and you're wondering, okay, doesn't the government, someone should know me. You tie the knot, it's in a registry somewhere. If I've not told the bank or the bank hasn't seen me coming for school fees, they'll assume I'm still childless and single. So what are we doing if you're really to add value? We need to address that issue of trust, and it may not be a question that we can answer here today.
Okay, I think Gitao is looking at me badly, but Kenneth, do you have a point of view? Maybe we can use this to wrap up.
I think to the gentleman at the back, I really respect these people who sell ideas at concept and get funding and get dollars and then sit in incubators and then the experiment begins because in the West it works because they're betting that they'll hit the next M-Pesa. But to convince a Kenyan investor to try their luck is very hard. And at this point in time, I would have hoped that there was several companies that would have made it, which would have given Kenyans or Kenyan businesses or Kenyan wealthy Kenyans the idea that instead of buying a plot, let me finance these ideas, innovations, these young men and women. But unfortunately, the news just constantly shows you the company that started with 5 employees, a year later they were at 80, and 3 years later they've shut down. So it's a very valid concern, and it's something that hopefully a few come out successful in the next few years to give us some more trust. But even my own personal money, there's a reason why all these billboards still sell plots all over the country. So,
I want to come back to the innovation question. And, at a personal level, I've been an entrepreneur now for 22 years. And that's how old my company is right now. It's not a big one. We have about 10 people. But we've been able to tick along because we always had this principle of keep your costs to minimum, sell at a fairly good premium, and be a bit of a boutique. That's why we're alive till today. If you want to talk about technology startups that succeeded, what I've come to learn in Kenya is that they're very quiet. You don't even know they exist. I'll give you an example. This morning I was at Pesapal, right? There's something I'm going to be doing with them, a webinar next week. When I went to his office, Liko, who's the founder of the company, I went to their office, I think 2-3 years ago during COVID. I think there was one building in the corner. If you saw their office, where they were when they first started, it was a small little room somewhere near Upper Hill. Near State House. Today I went there. They now occupy an entire campus of 3 houses. They might even own them. They have about 250 to 300 employees on site. The entire workforce is about 400 people across East Africa. Do you hear them making noise? Do you hear the guy going to conferences and speaking? Have you heard of a company called Turnkey? Turnkey provide insurance solutions across Africa and even, I think, into the Middle East. Do you hear anything about them? They also have AI solutions. Earlier this year, they had a conference and they had an AI chatbot audio that was speaking with a Kikuyu accent and giving you feedback about your policy. Have you heard about them? They're quiet. And the list goes on and on and on. The most successful technology startups in the ecosystem are not hype masters. They're quiet, they're grinding away, and they're closing big deals quietly. Many of them, by the way, you'll find are B2B businesses. They're not so much in the B2C space. But these guys are turning over millions of dollars and you don't know about them. Have you heard of smart applications? They do medical systems and stuff for information. They're all over Africa, I think 20 countries. Have you heard of them? People don't know this, but they're guys who are quietly crushing it in the technology startup ecosystem within Kenya. The thing is, they're very quiet. They're not making noise. They're not attending conferences. They're not sitting in incubators, but they're there doing amazing things. And I think maybe that's a lesson to our young and restless people, that it's not about racing around, buying new MacBooks and iPhones and looking the part. It's about actually building a business that makes a profit by solving a problem. So thank you very much to our panel. I believe Gitao has actually stood up. He's trying to tell me something. Our panelists, thank you so much. Please give them a hand. And yes, very much appreciated.